asking you to say what you mean and to mean what you say. To dare not just to care, but to say that you care. To give your word and to keep it. Today we live in a state of deep hunger for straight talk because it's so hard to find. There are so few places we can go where nobody is trying to sell us anything. TED is one of those few places, and that's why we're here. When someone gives a TED Talk, they speak with conviction. We're so hungry for it that some of us binge on TED Talks. We lie on our beds with our laptops and consume the passion and conviction of the women and men who are sharing their most powerful and important ideas and experiences. After we've heard a brilliant TED Talk, we feel as if we've been fed with something magical, don't we? The source of that magic is actually not very mysterious. We all have the ability to make powerful statements. It's just that we receive so little encouragement to do so. I want to encourage you today by first talking about why it is that powerful, enduring speech can be so hard to find. Next, I want to talk about how to access the creative power of public speaking. And finally, I want to encourage you to speak up by telling you how vitally important it is that you do so. Today, it can seem difficult for us to make a serious statement. Raise your hand if you sometimes feel afraid to say what you truly believe. Say something serious, and you risk being mocked. Not because of what you said, but because you spoke up. We live in a culture in which irony and failure dominate our entertainment. We watch The Simpsons and The Family Guy and The Real Housewives of any city because watching others fail so spectacularly is comforting somehow. We laugh and say to ourselves, well, at least I'm not as fat and stupid as Homer Simpson, right? Never occurs to us that Homer is just a cartoon, or that there is nothing real about those housewives. My story is that I am a student of choices. For a long time I was an actor, and then I became a teacher, and then a scholar of performance studies. I'm fascinated by the choices that we make in life and the way that they come to shape our life stories. Later, I began to teach performance studies and then to teach public speaking. And I am delighted to be able to say to you that I have found a new creative spark through teaching public speaking. My spark comes from the power of the idea that leadership and powerful public speaking are connected together by the choices that we make. By making choices powerfully, I believe that we have the ability to change the world. Great leaders take choices and turn them into deep commitments. If you'll bear with me for a little while, I want to talk with you about the theory behind performative speech. A philosopher named J.L. Austin wrote this great little book in the 1960s that was called How to Do Things with Words. Austin talks about moments when the things that we say actually have the power to change the world. He calls those moments performatives, not just because we have to perform them, but also because when we say those words, the act of speaking them somehow has the effect of changing the world. A performative speech act changes the world because we take up what we say. We're supposed to live up to what we say in an enduring kind of way. When we speak a performative, we generally expect ourselves and others to live up to it. Well, don't underestimate the power of that fact. There's actually great power in a performative speech act. Austin gave us a valuable example of performative speech, a wedding ceremony. As the people who are about to be married stand up before their friends and family, they're in a state of becoming, a kind of already but not yet. They're about to transform themselves and the world by saying two little words, I do. At the moment that they say those words, they transform themselves and the world in an enduring way. An officially appointed person will stand up and say something like, "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you." As long as there are human beings on this earth keeping records of such things, history will record that on that day and at that time, those two people were married. They have changed the world in an enduring way by saying two little words. And who can predict what the power and consequences of their commitment will be? But where did that official get her vested power? The power of performative speech is provided by social capital. Many of us want to get married. We think of marriage as an institution of great value. And because of that, social capital accumulates around that performative speech act. Now, that's not a value that can immediately be sold. It's a social good that we desire. And because of that, marriage is a kind of cultural container that gives us the opportunity to make an important and enduring commitment. Do you take this person to be your partner in sickness and in health for as long as you both shall live? I don't. Well, maybe. Can we just try it out for a little while? I mean, as long as you both shall live? After we speak a performative speech act, we are supposed to live up to it. That's something that Austin calls uptake. Any failure to take up our vows renders them not false, but unhappy. Now, it won't be any surprise to you that fewer and fewer of us are keeping our marriage vows. In fact, Eurostat reports that across Europe over the last 40 years, marriage rates have declined by over 50%. That means that fewer and fewer of us can even be bothered to get married in the first place. And many of us are unhappy. Austin describes the relationship between a performative speech act and its uptake as a sequential relationship. First we speak the vow, then we live up to it. But it turns out that that's actually not the case. Later thinkers, such as Pierre Bourdieu and Judith Butler, have pointed out that in fact, it's the social capital, it's the living up to it that gives performative speech its power. And that's where the problem that we are facing, I think, where it comes from. Today, fewer and fewer of us care to keep our commitments. We don't live up to our vows, and that won't come as any kind of a surprise to you, right? It's happening not just on the obvious levels, such as marriage vows, political promises, business agreements, and the like, but it's also happening on an everyday level. I'll meet you there at 5. Oh, you won't? I'll call you tomorrow. Not so much. Now, you might think that that kind of behavior is no big deal, or you might just think that it's kind of rude. But I don't think it has anything much to do with either civility or morality. The problem is that we face too many choices. And when alternatives present themselves, we take them. We live in an economy in which we don't actually need most of what we consume. And so instead, it becomes more important for other people to see our consumption. We don't get the same lasting satisfaction that we once got out of making a commitment to each other that serves our real needs. So instead, we make a whole series of choices that are made more for the sake of the audience that is watching. We don't make lasting commitments to each other. Instead, we friend our online avatars. When you composed the About Me section of your Facebook page or your LinkedIn page, what was uppermost in your mind? Were you thinking about really telling the world who you are? Or were you just aware of the fact that the online world is watching? Our performative speech acts of all kinds are losing their force. That's a phenomenon that Austin calls etiolation. Etiolation is a term that biologists use to describe plants that are being deprived of light. Their leaves gradually turn yellow, their stalks get longer and longer as they desperately seek for the light, and eventually they just die. Austin says that performative speech that is given just for an audience is etiolated speech. He calls it a kind of parasitic speech. It gradually sucks the life out of healthy performative speech acts. Let me give you an example. In the movie The Matrix, there are endless rows of human bodies lying in pods, being farmed by the Sentinels, and their actual lives are being sucked away into the virtual world. Just as Baudrillard described it, the virtual is now more powerful than the real. So today, I want to ask you to think about how you can begin to reverse that process. If it's true that life is made up of a series of choices, then by making those choices deeply and truly and with commitment, we are literally recreating ourselves. So I hope by now that you can agree with me that the power of speech lies within ourselves. And we can have access to that power. But first, we have to take the time to figure out what it is that we really care about. What do we value? Real leadership, like powerful public speaking, is based in an enduring commitment to values. The source of a speaker's power is his or her credibility. And a huge part of credibility is trustworthiness. Are you speaking to me with all of who you are, or are you just saying what you think I want to hear? We're beginning to learn the difference between those two things because we have been betrayed so often. First, let's think of speakers whose commitment was ultimate. Nelson Mandela, Aung San Suu Kyi, Martin Luther King, Malala Yousafzai. Each of those people literally risked his or her life in order to speak up. Now let's think of people whose promises were not kept, whose inspiring statements turned out to be false, and whose leadership was a betrayal. More than 40 years after President Richard Nixon and the Watergate scandal, we still haven't recovered our political innocence. Today, more than ever, our world needs you to speak up wherever you are. Our weary and cynical world needs your passion, your conviction, and your creative spark. So let's have a look at an example, a famous example, of the creative power of public speaking. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, which is encountered by many to be the most powerful speech given in the 20th century. When speech experts analyze his speech, they talk about its contents and his delivery. And to be sure, the speech is brilliantly structured, and Dr. King delivered it with tremendous skill and power. But I think there's another reason why the speech is as great as it is. As Dr. King spoke, he stood in front of the Lincoln Memorial on the Mall in the heart of the capital of the most powerful nation on earth. Hundreds of thousands of women and men were there to hear him and to invest him with their power. Since then, millions of other people have watched the speech. Children memorize entire pieces of it in school. I watch the speech regularly on YouTube. And every time I do, it brings a lump to my throat and it makes me stand just a little bit taller. When Dr. King spoke, his credibility shone like the sun. When Dr. King spoke, he took for a few moments the weight of an entire race on his shoulders, and he was equal to the task. As Dr. King spoke, his commitment pushed against the tide of history. And men and women, black and white, stood with him, and together they were able to turn the tide. When Dr. King spoke, he taught us all something deeply valuable about human dignity. He taught us the importance of speaking up. And by doing so, he made all of us better people. I'm Simon Dutoit, and I'm a teacher of speech communication. And today, I'm asking you to speak up wherever you are, to say what you mean and mean what you say. I am passionate about the idea that by speaking with conviction, we can catch our creative spark. I've spoken to you today about the theory behind performative speech, but what I hope you took from that is the power and importance of your commitments. Your commitments are what will shape your life story and give it the unique trajectory that is yours alone. Your truthfully spoken word is the container that will hold your convictions. And the more you fail to speak, the more the power of your convictions is lost. Instead, access your creative spark. Cast aside your fear. Did you raise your hand at the beginning of this speech? You too could be among the people who you have come here today to listen to. Each of us has taken this opportunity to lead us collectively towards an incredibly precious gift. We are speaking up about the value of human life in all its richness. That's the kind of talk that you came here today to hear, a TED Talk. And I thank you for coming here to take that step and for helping me to make this speech possible. And I hope that you too will find your creative spark and then share it with the world. Thank you.